And we indeed are live on Facebook. It is the 29th of September. It is the year 2022. It is episode 2 of the Gender Exchange. My name is Nosana Sondiyazi. We have a very, very special guest with us this evening, Hlongwa. And this is a very interesting woman. And I can't wait for us to all get to know her. The gender exchange, some of you may be only coming across it today. So I'll just share a little bit of background. Why are we having a gender exchange? Some people have been following Tholwana Molemo since 2019, when we had our first trans exchange at Naledi San, and we interviewed some fantastic trans women. And we just got people to be bold and brave and just own up to their existence, right? And this time we thought we can't just do that just for one day or just 1 month. It has to be ongoing. So the Gender Exchange online series, we are finding interesting activists, thinkers, specialists, doctors, lawyers to come in and talk about gender diversity, right? And we want to hear more than just the acts and the laws and the bills that are being passed. We actually want to hear, how are people living their trans lives every day? How are people accessing services? How are people socializing, right? So in the theme of the gender exchange, I would like to introduce Hlongwa, who is a keynote speaker, a special guest by invitation only, who graces podiums and speaks on different topics. Today, we're going to hear what those topics are. She's a humanist agent of transformation. What does that mean? We're going to hear that today. She's also an architect and a development planning consultant, as well as a YouTuber with a YouTube channel. So I'd like to welcome you, Sia. Thank you so much for joining us on the Trans Exchange as Tholwana Molemo. Please introduce yourself and tell us who you are. Yes, please. How are you? Are you still with us here? What are we doing? Are we frozen?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. We can hear you. How are you? We welcome you to the Gender Exchange.
Okay, that's an interesting turn of events. But I think whatever it is, it's probably going to invigorate whatever I have to say. So it's worth it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Yeah.
Great. So yes, my name is Sia Hlongwa. I like to be called or referred to as Madame Sia.
Oh yes, Madame.
Madame Sia, mostly because I feel like I'm a madam of the manor, madam of the house, Madame Speaker. And in fact, I do see my future speaking in spaces of note and decision making for my community, for the purpose of opening doors and opening up spaces for my people that I feel like only I can. And I can't wait for more doors to open in the direction of making that possible. But I would say, who is Sia and what is a humanist? Okay.
Yes.
I would say I never sort of had this life thing figured out. I never fully understood what activism was about. And I never really threw myself into activism. It kind of came into my life in the form of a traumatic experience back in 2016.
Okay.
In that experience, I had to go through a very deep healing and search within myself to find who I am and to reaffirm my own insecurities, to say, yes, there are certain things that I can't do for myself, and lean in on the support of my community. I was very fortunate that I had grown up raised by a single grandmother in KZN, in the city of eThekwini, Durban. And my grandmother was a single woman, raised me with a very religious outlook on life. But for some reason, she was very open-minded about gender, about sexuality, and she just wanted me to love myself and live to my fullest. Yeah. Unfortunately, the rest of the world had a very different outlook. In my experience, be it in institutions like schools and high schools, universities, I found that, you know, there'd be a lot of purporting, sort of posturing as inclusive. But when you actually go down to the nitty-gritties, what does accountability look like? What do consequences look like for actions of discrimination and bullying, etc.? There'd be no real accountability. And in fact, then my experience back in 2016 of sexual violation that happened, I found that I had to go back and find myself all over again, all the building, all the self-assurance that I'd received from my grandmother prior to her passing, I had all now, you know, gone down the tubes, because I was now experiencing this and going to a police station trying to report the crime. I found myself, you know, struggling with people actually finding this funny and questioning my experience to say, is it really rape? Is it really sexual assault? Is it even a crime? Are you the person who's imagining things? And questioning my sanity because of my performance of gender, which then veers into pathological alignments of you know, mental condition and the mental state of the individual that's reporting the matter. And I think in my experience, I started to internalize a lot of that, and it took me a long time to come out of my shell once again. But I was very fortunate that the community of organizations around me insisted on helping me to find myself again, in believing in me, in providing safe spaces where I could sit and listen to other people like me talk about their experiences, and us to get together and validate each other and encourage each other. I was then inspired to go back to school, where I did my honors and my master's at Wits University, at the beck and call, but also the push and the shove of Jabu Pereira, who was the director of Iranti at the time.
Yeah.
He's the one that saw my trauma and my experience and decided, you know what, I think you should go back to school. And that's how my journey began as an activist. Once I went back to school, I got the keys, I got the words, I got the ability to compute how the system works. And what I like about the degree that I did, which was a master's in development planning, was that it teaches you how the system runs, how these laws are made, who's responsible for putting these laws together, even the very proposal and the framework around the system of what does it look like to propose a law, to propose a policy at a national state, at a regional state, even at a municipal state, and looking at how those laws are even implemented. And what accountability structures exist for checking that implementation, and also calling to action, calling to suit organizations that are failing to implement the Constitution and those policies. And I think for me, that was an awakening. It was really intended to help me to be a conduit to the system working better for what's already existing. But I saw it as a step in the direction of changing the narrative of people like me who have experienced sexual violation, who've experienced discrimination, and don't really have a means to say, let's change the laws. And let's also not just change the laws, but let's see what laws exist and how we can improve the efficacy and the implementation thereof. And that's how I stepped into activism. I was very excited that I was then welcomed into different rooms. And I'll say that, yeah, that's how the journey began, and how I saw myself as a humanist now, as a person who steps into spaces and helps to transform and reform policy and law, and look at how those can be better implemented to advance our agenda of diversity and inclusion for all people.
Wow, Sia, I now suddenly have more questions to just dig deep into what you just said now. But let's just go back and look at the topic of today and kind of put you in perspective when it comes to that. We are talking trans, unisex, and intersex human rights, which you are very involved in. And now you are really speaking how deeply you've done that, especially just within your studies and within your activism. So some people, they see these words and they don't actually know what they mean. They hear that there's unisex clothing, they hear that there's transness, but they're not quite sure like what that is. And the intersex position is also highly, highly unknown. So let's just talk about how you identify. What is your gender expression? And what is your gender identity?
Perfect. I like the question because it's it's loaded, but then also it's an opportunity for me to create teachable moments. Because I feel as though there are a lot of stereotypes that come with the general sort of mainstream understanding of gender. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I come from a Christian background, and in my Christian background, I was taught that sex and gender are very much the same thing. And essentially the performance of gender is dictated by your sex as identified at birth.
Yeah.
So in my activism, I have sort of lent myself and sort of planted myself in the school of thought that gender and sex are two very different concepts. And in fact, the performance of gender does not necessarily have to correlate or be congruent to your sex and your sex descriptor as identified at birth on your birth certificate and on your ID initially, unless you changed it. I would say in my case, I was identified as male at birth, but as I grew older, especially into my teen years, I started developing breast tissue, and my voice never broke. My peers had voice breaking, but I would continue to be a soprano solo singer in my school choir, singing soprano and descant, literally even singing those whistle tones that Mariah Carey used to do without issue. Without issue.
That's amazing.
But I would say that the major thing for me, which was the first alarm bell, was when I started growing the breast tissue and not having a bra and not knowing what to do with the stuff that's growing on my chest when I have the organs that are supposed to identify me as male. But as a teenager, people could now see the sort of the tissue through my t-shirts, because our school t-shirts were not really designed to hide those kinds of things. So my grandmother sort of solved that issue temporarily by buying me, or investing rather, in vests, like undergarments that I could wear underneath my shirt just to conceal the tissue. But I would still get bullied in school, because I eventually went to an all-boys school where, you know, students would approach me and say, but what's a girl doing in an all-boys school? And I would say that's when my first sort of introduction to what intersex is all about, and how we as people don't really, you know, fully allow for diversity, even in our own bodies. We question our makeup, we question our physique, and doubt ourselves even in our performance of gender because of how we're built. And I think that for me, that took away from my ability to express myself and actualize myself the way that I could have fully become the seer that I am now, right? And I would say that, you know, when it comes to the sort of more liberal, more diverse ways of understanding gender, there is intersex. People who are intersex are people that would have sort of biological developments in their bodies as they mature into adulthood, that would not ordinarily sort of exist in someone who's a binary form of male and a binary form of female, right? And I would say that, you know, the first thing that comes to mind would be the growth of facial hair. And a lot of cis women experience that. The existence of testicles, for example, that might grow or develop when someone is intersex but might have been identified as female at birth. The deepening of the voice. And there's so many other characteristics, of course, which we could go into detail about, but for the purpose of this exercise, it was just an example. But people who are intersex would be, for example, Caster Semenya, who is for me a real hero in our community and society as citizens of Africa, in that they were able to identify who they are and not allow themselves to be limited to their identity, but to go forward and say, I'm going to excel in my craft, and I'm going to not allow myself to be defined by my difference and how I don't necessarily toe the line and fit into the boxes and the binaries and the stereotypes of gender and sort of, you know, societal pressures and perspectives of who I should perform as, you know, in terms of gender. And I love how, you know, when it comes to intersex bodies, that there's sort of now a better understanding and less of a mixing up of people who are intersex who happen to have traits of the opposite sex to what they were identified as at birth, right? Which can be a blend or a mixture of any of the sort of two sex descriptors. And then we have people who are bisexual. People who are bisexual are people that are attracted to two different genders, right?
Yes.
Bisexual.
And that's not even all the genders.
Yes. And now there's a general mix-up.
Yeah, but you're jumping into my next question, right? Because now you've explained your gender expression, and your gender expression is basically how you walk through the world, like how we see you, how you present yourself, you know, because I'm seeing a beautiful woman in front of me. And it's only in conversations like this whereby we actually have to give it a name, that how a person is being seen is how they're expressing themselves. If you can, if you can like have a kind of inkling that, hey, did I see an Adam's apple? Hey, did I see facial hair underneath the makeup? Hey, you know, those kinds of things. When you look at that, instead of how a person expresses themselves, then you are completely ignoring how a person wants to be seen. Am I right? Because you express as female, and you identify as a woman, because those, I just want to get those clear, right? Even though you discovered only during puberty that you are actually intersex, because some people, when they are born, the doctor knows and tells the parents, actually, your child has got ambiguous genitalia, or later they'll find out for another reason, it's the chromosomes, because sometimes people don't actually know until puberty. So did your parents know that you were intersex at birth, or did you all discover only during your puberty stage?
Yeah, I would say it was mostly during my puberty stage that those things started to arise. But also I would just, you know, I would just end up in trouble whenever I would try and go to male bathrooms. Eventually there was a family meeting to discuss it, that whenever anyone was with me, that they shouldn't trust me alone in a male bathroom, and that I should be sent to a woman's bathroom. And that was decided in my teen years, that listen, after all the dramas and the embarrassments that I had being pulled by security guards out of male bathrooms and told, listen, what are you doing in the men's bathroom? Like, and in English, the translation would be, you know, you have such a filthy mind, young lady. What are you doing in the men's bathroom?
Yeah, sure. And you grew up being told that you're a boy and you didn't think you were doing anything wrong, right?
Yeah. And in my experience since then, I then became intentional to just use the female bathroom, because I was tired of being embarrassed and having people in the mall staring at me now, seeing this girl who was perverted, who is stalking men and sneaking into the men's bathrooms. Meanwhile, I just wanted to pee like other human beings. But because people see breasts on your chest, they don't even give themselves an opportunity to understand that this person is somewhere in the middle, and you know, this sort of binary that we have of saying bathrooms are supposed to be for a particular sex and so on, and assigning that, it sort of limits people's freedom. And for me, it wasn't even a freedom of chosen nature. It was just biology. I did nothing to make that happen. And I think for me, in sort of now understanding and affirming who I am, I then realized that I was more comfortable in expressing my femininity than my masculinity. And I didn't want to go and have an operation to have the tissues removed, but in fact, I wanted to embrace that, and I wanted to celebrate my feminine side. So I learned how to use makeup, and I started dressing more feminine. And I started even exploring bras, even though my cup size is not as enhanced. But I enjoy the process of celebrating femininity, doing feminine things, and not even limiting the things that are traditionally seen as feminine to people who express as female. I think everyone should be free to be who they are and to express themselves as they see fit. Yeah.
So, Sia, there's still some of us that are still catching up to these terms. Sometimes we hear these terms. Just 2 days ago, we were breaking down what is non-binary, what is androgynous. So today, I'd like us to break down the what is unisex, what is intersex, what is fluid, what is binary versus non-binary. But first, let's start off with what is the trans umbrella? Because so many of us fall under that, right? I even know that there's even a difference between calling a person trans and calling them transgender, because trans makes them fall under the trans umbrella. But if you can correct me, but if you're transgender, then you're identifying the binary transgender, that I'm definitely a trans woman, I'm definitely a trans man. And the unisex, androgynous, intersex, questioning, gender fluid is all in the actual umbrella. Can you just please take us through what is the actual umbrella? What all falls under what is trans?
What is trans? Yeah, I would say that under simple terms, transness is generally around the performance of gender, and how the performance of gender is very binary in our society. And so when I speak of the performance of gender, it's how you are seen, how your image is read, right? Whether it's physically, like when you're naked, or even how you dress, right? And there are different, thank goodness for technology, there are different ways in which we can express ourselves, different ways in which we can enhance the way our image is presented, so that we can either masculinize or even feminize our performance of gender. And so, generally the stereotypical normative sort of ideation around image is that, someone with a penis would then wear a suit, would then cut their hair short, would then have a deep voice and maybe even facial hair, and walk and posture their performance of gender in a particular way, right? And so someone born with a vagina who does not necessarily identify with the traditional norms and the traditional sort of ideations around image and the performance of gender, that person would then be referred to as either androgynous if they wish to be non-binary, or then a transmasc, right? And transmasculinity refers to then a transgender man. And a transgender man would then have options, and vast array of options, of how this person can undergo a journey of reaching their own comfortable and sort of resonating version of masculinity that they would perform for themselves. And it's really less about the world and more about what makes that person comfortable in their own body. And that can be biological changes, that could speak to getting hormone replacement therapy, testosterone, right? Or that could speak to surgery. There could be cosmetic surgery in terms of having top surgery or bottom surgery. That could even speak to, going as far as having implants of facial hair if that doesn't develop even after taking the hormone replacement therapy. There's so many different accepted, but I would say the key and probably most, I would say, gut-wrenching process has probably been sort of having the more social changes. And those speak to the process of acclimatizing to what the transition would look like for you. And what would it look like to build a new network of friends who understand you, who understand your new gender, who understand your new identity, who resonate with that and respect that. And what does it look like for you to socialize yourself even in the family unit? What does it look like with your relatives, with your father, with your mother, your relative siblings, etc.? And how do you have conversations around gender with communities of people that were previously in your circle, and conscientize them as to what your pronouns are and what that shift looks like?
Yeah.
Now, when we look at the umbrella, it's always key to understand that there would be two sort of polar opposites generally, which would be seen as masculinity and femininity, male and female, and then those in the middle. And the direct middle, or the apex, then would be the non-binary or the androgynous, who don't really identify necessarily with any gender, but have a more neutral or a balanced performance of gender between the two. But then we also have, the existence of fluidity, giving people the agency to say that I don't necessarily subscribe to being limited to one particular gender or the performance of gender. It goes according to my mood, it goes according to my feelings, it goes according to my spirituality on that day, and I do what I please. And to be honest, I do think that we as human beings, we over intellectualize, we overthink these things. At the end of the day, people just want to get food, water, shelter, and love. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Why should that be done in high heels or a skirt or a suit or deep voice or high voice or facial hair or no face? At the end of the day, people just need what they need.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people need what they need. And I think it's really important that we continue to have these conversations to get to a place where we are awake, as to who we are as a society and what we really want for ourselves. Because I do think that we have a tendency that we no longer deal with the critical, real issues that we should be talking about. We should be talking about green energy. We should be talking about equality. We should be talking about ending world hunger. We should be striving for real pertinent issues and not worrying about what our neighbor is wearing and who
exactly, right? So these are all such distractions, right? But you've touched on all the questions except for the unisex one. How does one understand what is unisex outside of clothing or expression? Like, is there a proper kind of understanding, and how does unisex fit between trans and intersex? Is that also just an umbrella?
Yeah, I would say being unisex would probably fit under the umbrella and the understanding of what non-binary would be.
Yes.
So someone who has a unification or unity of the sexes and embraces that balance and fully lives in that. And that for me has been sort of performed and sort of ideated in religion in ways that are really confronting. But at the same time, it worries me how people intentionally interpret religion in ways that are very toxic and heteronormative, that they fail to actually see that majority of the deities and even the fictional characters that have evolved in ancient literature have always been people that sort of embrace the unity and the balance, which is holy in itself,
Absolutely.
Not allowing yourself to be limited to what your body is. We're not our bodies. We're more than our bodies as human beings. We're not just animals on this planet. We have a soul. And our soul should really impact in how we live. And that's more than just what we say. It's more than just what we wear. It's who we are. And so when we talk about unisex, I think that we're talking about the future of our society there. I think we're talking about the future of how we even compute our lifestyle to be less about the roles of what a man is traditional, what a woman is traditional, and move to a place where we are talking about what humanity needs. And what do allocating resources and harvesting resources and manufacturing resources so that is preserved, that dignity, that respect, that longevity of life for the human. Yeah.
Sure. Sia, you brought something in that I didn't think of when it comes to unisex, that it's the unity, right? What I like to say to people is perhaps I'm maybe hosting a coming out kind of session or something, and then we may be all telling our stories. And most of our stories come with how we wanted to express with clothing, or later when we do express with clothing, when we can, choose what we wear. Then if we are accused, like me, I liked boys' clothes. I made my granddad buy me those trousers from the boys' department. They were like formalish, the pleats, right? And then my grandfather, I was like, please, I love these pants. Ne? And my grandfather didn't see anything funny about me liking those pants. He just saw that I liked those pants. It's only when we got home where my grandmother was like, those are boys' pants. Take them back. Nosana is not going to wear those pants. Ne? And what I like to say when it comes to like people who like, your parents, for example, perhaps are buying you clothes. I like to say, you are making those clothes unisex. When you are being teased that you're wearing boys' clothes as a girl or girls' clothes as a boy, you should just tell them, no, now that I'm wearing it, they're no longer girls' clothes or they're no longer boys' clothes. I'm making them unisex. And because there was even another time where we had a dialogue with the disability sector, and I was explaining unisex to an audience of differently abled people who one was blind, and she was sitting there with the person who takes her shopping, right? And she was like, what? This whole time I could have been wearing anything. You mean like there's an accident? And I was like, wow, yeah. I mean, you shouldn't have to. And it was so interesting to kind of even hear that actually, without even seeing yourself in the mirror, the way we know ourselves, there isn't a need to express in a particular way that I found out that way. So now this leads to my next question, right? That we need to be influenced with pop culture, right? And we can't just be individuals unknown and only known in our small little pockets in society, in our streets, to be demystifying this unisex or intersex or trans. Do you think pop culture can play a role in demystifying trans and intersex lives? I don't know what I mean by pop culture, but we all see what's trending, we all see what's popular, but is our visibility being popularized? What do you think of that?
To be honest, the only reason why we as a society have inequality is because of a lack of authentic representation of diversity in the spaces that we live in, the spaces that we work in, our politics, and even in our entertainment sectors, right, across the board. And I think that it's so key to have representation because that speaks to sort of rectifying and also having an integral mix of different perspectives that are so critical to cater for all people's needs, whether we're talking about having nappy change facilities in your local clinic. For me, that's a miracle that we still don't have that in 2020, where the majority of people that go to your government clinics are actually women with children who have the children on their backs. And sometimes it's not even the children that they're going to get assistance for, it's for themselves as the mothers being sick. But if they need to change the baby's nappies, they have to put the child on the sink and try to navigate changing the baby's nappies. And for me, that's just an example of the systemic level of having blind spots as to what it looks like to authentically have representation in terms of diversity and seeing the needs of the people and meeting them where they are. And for me, that speaks to the hypocrisy of the system and how it challenges people that say, no, we don't have representation. We want to see diversity. We want to see a dispelling and also a doing away of binary ways of thinking in the system to include people that are diverse, people that have interesting and different ways of articulating themselves, embodying themselves, performing gender and moving through space, right? And for me, that speaks to policy, that speaks to the rules, that speaks to the laws, and also the societal ways of thinking, the normative thinking. So yes, the media is so key in those conversations. Entertainment is so key, but not just that, every sector, having someone that looks like you, speaks like you, moves like you, and even in the ideation around gender represents you. I think that's so key because it helps you to validate yourself, to say, you know, there's someone who is just like me, who's a winner in the spaces that I want to find relevant. And so it inspires the younger version of me and you to see themselves out there and try, you know, to be the best version of themselves, and not allow the voices of the toxicity around them in those that purport normativity and want to limit the performance of gender and actually pathologize our people because of the fact that they don't support who we are. I think, you know, when I have these conversations and generally as our community, what we always say at the end of all our gatherings is, oh, you know, I felt so safe. I felt so seen. I felt so visible. I felt so comfortable. It's because we felt represented in those spaces. Whenever we have our gatherings, our symposiums, or even our events, meetings as friends, we find kin. And then finding kin, that can be in the workplace. That could be in parliament, your local politician, your councillor, your teacher in school, your lecturer in the university. The more we have the diversity, whether we're talking race, whether we're talking gender, whether we're talking sexuality, the more it's easier for the person in that space who's of the minority groups to perform at their best. So if you're making tea, you make the best tea. If you're a cleaner, you do the best cleaning. If you're a pilot, you arrive on time, you're sober-minded, and you execute your responsibilities timelessly and with quality because you feel seen in that space. But similarly, the opposite effect happens when we have a society of people who are saying, our narrative is center, is the way, the truth, and the light. And therefore, everyone else must then be left behind, excluded, becomes a tick box exercise to get a yes and a picture moment, you know, and that's it, you know, photograph moment, photo op, and not fully sort of implement what real inclusion, real diversity, real representation is. And so I like how you talk about popular culture or pop culture. Pop culture is, you know, a way of saying that we as a people, we are changing the script, we are flipping the script, and we are creating the world that we want. And in pop culture, we are allowing the masses to vote with their eyes, to vote with their iPads, their phones, by watching, by liking, by commenting, by following the work and the contributions that those bodies are making to society. And I think that pop culture has a way of being toxic and positive at the same time. But I like how this new generation is allowing people to be themselves without judgment. And the ones that do come with judgment, obviously for me, it's always been an indication of ignorance.
Yes, of course.
And I think we should just allow fools to be fools and suffer fools gladly. and allow them to limit themselves in their own box of existence. I think, true success and true sort of authentic, fulfilled life and sort of existence in this realm speaks to allowing yourself to manifest your best version, even in your own body, your body as a temple, to even the things that you choose and the company that you choose to exist in your surroundings.
Yes,
and that speaks to gender.
We need to totally influence pop culture, because I think as gender minorities, as queer people, we felt excluded from pop culture. That to popularize us is a new thing. That like, oh, we're popular now, finally. We're part of the pop culture, right? So now you've mentioned different things. You've mentioned that there's certain aspects and areas that we kind of need to feel included in, right? But speaking of gender, it doesn't exist alone, because now there's the sex and the gender that you explained that we know is not the same thing. Your sex is biological. Your gender is how you live and think and walk and feel, which may not that may not link necessarily always to what your sex is and what you are assigned at birth. But now there's also your sexuality, right? So what I'm aware of, that we are still like expecting heteronormativity with our gender and our sexual orientation. If you're going to be a trans woman and you're going to be very feminine, it's going to be expected that you'll be dating a masculine person or a male. It will be very rare that a trans woman will be dating another woman, whether it's another trans woman or a cis woman, or So now this makes now your gender and your sexuality kind of like a political space to kind of operate in. So what I want to ask is, how is your gender separate or connected to your sexuality?
That's deep. That's very deep. Wow.
I want to answer. May I answer first while you think that in? I was always attracted to very feminine women. And when I dated like a more tomboy kind of woman not too long ago, I noticed that the other butch lesbians were like, hey, is that your woman? Why isn't she like, as if like I'm expected to be dating like a slay queen of some type,
Yeah.
As if like when I perform my queerness, I'm expected within my peers or within my queer group that like somebody has got a gender role. And it will be assumed that I've got a more masculine gender role because I'm more androgynous and masculine, and therefore it will be expected who I will date. And therefore be this like presumption, but the both of you are a little bit tomboyish. Who's who? I'm like, why are we having the same conversation that we ran away from? You know what I mean? And that's what I'm talking about with the connectedness and the separation with your gender and your sexuality. And why are we policing ourselves like this?
Yes. So for me, I've always found very masculine people attractive. And in my attraction to masculine bodies, I never, for the majority of my life, majority of the years, I never freely allowed myself to embrace but also explore trans men in my spectrum of attraction. And it's only recently that I found that a trans man was an option in my existence, because I just never even looked in that direction. I did have a few trans men that approached me before, but I just never really mind. And it's only recently that one moment for their own safety, but I found them to be quite intriguing and interesting, but also allowed me to enter into other realms of my sexuality that I never knew for myself. For me, that was really inspiring, and also allowed me as a trans woman to understand that, hey, the sort of general normative understanding of what a transgender woman is can be quite limiting. Most people assume that if you say that you were born with a penis, but you're transgender, it means you are then a transgender woman. And if you're a transgender woman, you're attracted to men, and that's it. And there's less of a conversation about transgender women being attracted to women, cis women. That happens sometimes. But then there's also the manifestation of then transgender women being attracted to trans men. That happens too. Or even then being bisexual or being attracted to both. That happens too. But in my particular sort of existence, but in also my experience, I've been attracted to masculinity. I've been attracted to masculine men, and now trans men as well, to some degree. And in my journey, I think the key thing has been sort of breaking down those stereotypes, because for me, it starts to concern me that, you know, when people talk about the LGBTQIA or even just the trans community, people attach stereotypes of what they think their sexuality should be just based on their performance of gender, when in fact the two don't really exist in congruency, or at least they don't need to. Yeah.
I love how you include the performance of gender, because we're all performing our gender, right? Even as a cisgender, heterosexual male, you are performing your maleness and your heteroness. We're not, it's not just restricted to us, right? And I want to talk about something, you know, a bit serious now. I'm going to jump in terms of moods and themes of the questions aren't necessarily linked to like how excited we're getting or how saucy we get. But something that's very important that we need to touch on, we are always going to touch on lifestyle and our own lived experiences. But here in the Free State, we are a little bit behind the rest of the country in the bigger cities. We're a little bit behind Johannesburg and Cape Town when it comes to access to services in different departments, like Department of Health. Like we all know that as trans NGOs, we are fighting for gender affirming healthcare primary healthcare facilities. We want HRT at clinics in your neighborhood, right? We also further on want to, you know, access our surgeries and our gender market changes, and these institutions that are dictating and you know, just taking away our own agency of how we decide, because the laws are there. So within your fight of you know, looking at how the laws are placed for us accessing our services, you know, whether it is a gender market change or HRT, how far are we, and what are you doing, and what can we do to kind of push the agenda forward?
I mean, to be honest, I mean, first we're going to talk about what the status quo right now is in South Africa. So right now, the gender market change is something that's accessible. What is the gender market change? Your ID, the way in which your gender, sex descriptor is indicated on your ID is based on your sex. And in South Africa, they've agreed, right? The government, the state has agreed to say that you can apply and get your gender marker change, or sex descriptor on your ID, to then not just be a sex descriptor, but to indicate your gender and your gender performance. Because nobody really checks your pants when you apply for a bank account. They see you when you arrive at the bank. So if you arrive with facial hair and a deep voice and performing in all your masculinity, and you actually have a vagina, your ID would say female. So generally we've seen there being a lack of systemic order in that, you know, when people arrive to the bank or arrive to institutions, their indicator of sex on their documents fails to then fully encapsulate who they are, because when they show up at the place, it could be someone completely different. And in agreeing, the state agreeing that someone can apply to get the gender marker change, it allows for people to show up as who they are and access services. without being discriminated against, right? Or at least that's what the purpose is. Unfortunately, that's not really the case at the moment. So in the work that I've been doing, I've been involved more at the accountability side of things, or in the accountability side of things, assisting institutions, organizations in what does the implementation of that look like, whether someone is still in the process of applying for that gender marker change on their ID document, right? And they're now in the university institution, or they are now attending a function at the university. What does that look like as far as them getting the reception they need from the university, getting the correct sort of gender indication on their student card, getting the appropriate sort of name or nickname that they want to use to be used in the spaces where they are working within the university space, or as a student now, the spaces that they're studying in by the lecturers and the peers, etc. I'm also then not just involved in that, but also providing the safe spaces and allowing for people to speak about their experiences and get access to counseling, and being the referral system to students that are experiencing any form of discrimination because they're trans, because they're gay, because they're lesbian, etc., and getting connected to the appropriate mental health departments. And then above and beyond that, I then, especially now that I'm alumni within the university space, I'm more invited as a panelist to sit in on hearings about issues around gender and gender equity within the university. If there is any form of sexual harassment, bullying, transphobia, biphobia, etc., and assist in sort of making sure that there is accountability, that people are then disciplined for their misconduct should they choose to be of discriminatory nature, and also get then any penalties or even any education that they might need as far as being conscientized and reoriented to understand gender in more diverse ways, so that it obviously purports and also upholds the transformation agenda that we need in these institutions. I would say that I've been very fortunate to be invited on the board of different institutions. I sit on the VIT RHI Clinic Community Board. I sit on the Be True to Me organization, which is a trans-led organization here in South Africa. I sit on their board as well. I sit in a new nascent organization called FAG Media. I sit on their board as well. And I'm also with Queerwell South Africa on their board. And in all of these responsibilities, I assist in guiding conversations around what their programs look like. What does it look like when they create awareness about gender and gender inclusion? I would say that right now, the biggest problem around accessing hormone replacement therapy has been around the fact that, yes, there are state initiatives that are talking about dispensing access to HRT, but unfortunately, that speaks to very sort of geographic location-oriented agendas, that only limit to main main hospitals, right?
Yeah,
main
academic hospitals sometimes. Yeah.
Academic hospitals. And those hospitals, unfortunately, are not accessible to most rural individuals, people living in sort of the outskirts and the peripheries, which is the majority of our people, which means that a lot of our community members end up having to travel to access HRT. And unfortunately, I mean, with our economic status, with our the lack of access to employment, and also now having an impact to the fact that now someone cannot afford HRT, but would like to access the free HRT, but can't because they need to travel and sleep over at a friend's place in the local city just to then access HRT through different programs. And then, of course, not to mention the fact that there is a limited amount that is made available free in terms of HRT. So then, obviously, all of these programs have waiting lists, and these waiting lists are now sitting at the hundreds.
Yeah.
And what does it look like for our people? It just means that a majority of the trans community and those that need hormone replacement therapy are not getting it, even though the government and these NGO parastatal organizations that do act as facilitators and conduits to the supply of HRT, they're failing to then, supply to everyone. It's just a very select few, first come, first served basis.
Mm.
But also, I would say, we also have the private sector. Private sector clinics and hospitals and even pharmacies do have, access to HRT and can facilitate that for people that wish to undertake that process of transition. But then, unfortunately, it is very expensive, but not to mention the fact that there's also systemic issues around the shortages.
Yes.
Now, we saw that during this pandemic, there was a decrease in the processes of manufacturing HRT, and very much so the transgender community was was impacted in a very visible way in the fact that there were shortages of access to HRT in the form of testosterone and estrogen. And going forward, this has had a long-term impact because there's just intermittent access, because there's still, a competition that's now emerged between the manufacturing of HRT and the manufacturing of vaccines. And because there's a priority that's been put on the processes of manufacturing vaccines and manufacturing these new treatments as well by these pharmaceutical manufacturers, there's a less focus on all of these other medications that are seen as elective in nature. And I would say that because of this now, community's been struggling, with access, even if you are in the private sector, which has more access than the public sector. But unfortunately, the majority of our people are unemployed and don't have that privilege. But those that are privileged are still struggling with access. And I would say that, yes, we have laws. These laws are supporting our people, but these laws are not speaking about what does it really look like on the ground, what's happening with the majority of people that are not going to get and are not getting HRT, and what programs are in place to support that, to make sure that they get access to delivery systems, get access to more informal ways of accessing their medications without having to travel so much with no resources. There are ad hoc organizations, NGOs, parastatal organizations that are trying experimental ways of getting access to HRT for people through delivery systems, through mobile house-to-house house calls and road shows. But unfortunately, those have not been very sustainable. They have not been very consistent due to very intermittent access to resources, due to the fluctuating agendas of focus, COVID, for example. But we are pushing that. We are pushing and trying to promote more access. I mean, I haven't really been involved directly, but I've been guiding and assisting in those conversations through the various networks and the boards that I'm sitting in, and having these conversations in making suggestions and pushing these agendas to be implemented by those that are more on the operational level of these organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to ask you something that was not in the interview questions, but now the lack of access to HRT and the affordability, and this makes me think of how the word transsexual and the terms transsexual became problematic, because now if you identify as transsexual, you've had access. You've had access to HRT, gender-affirming surgery sometimes, and now you are no longer transgender. You have upgraded to being transsexual because now your definition of yourself is clear that I'm visibly, physically. So what do you think of what do you think that now we are not using the term transsexual anymore? Do you agree that it puts class barriers between people that access, or do you think that somebody should have the right to call themselves transsexual?
I mean, to be honest, the less divisions, the better. The less divisions, the better. The more we allow our people to form the unified and collective sort of movement that we really are and we should be, the more improved, even the understanding of our people can be. I do think that, there is a lot of politicking that exists, in the performance of gender. And it doesn't just impact the marginalized populations. It speaks to, I think, all individuals, actors in our society. And in fact, those that perform gender in particular ways get rewarded in positions of power, get rejected should they fail to perform gender in particular ways, and get excluded from accessing really much needed resources. In fact, when we look at even the hierarchies of power, we see that the performance of gender and the use of gender in particular ways can allow people to either ascend or descend in terms of accessing just basic livelihood and getting access to the care that they need, even when it comes to the healthcare system. And so, when we talk about transgender individuals, it's far more life-threatening when you live in a society where individuals can be badgered, can be bullied, can be abused, can fall victim to hate speech and hate crimes, like femicide and so on, because of their performance of gender. If you don't, quote unquote, read as the gender that you identify with, right, you could be in danger of being attacked. And people forget that being aligned with the gender that you subscribe to, it speaks to financial resources. It speaks to having a particular level of privilege, and not everyone has that. Getting the clothes that match your gender performance that you affiliate with, getting the hormone replacement therapy, having the social transitioning process guided by a therapist or a social worker, counselor, and getting those kinds of services to help you to assimilate, but also to rationalize that in your own mind, with mental wellness in mind, of course. It's not something that everyone can just wake up and do.
Yeah.
And so I think when we talk about sort of the transgender community, it's really, really, really important that we also look at the politics behind it, because it speaks to now the average Joe. Let's say, for example, the average Joe has a passion to go into IT, for example.
Yeah.
But the average Joe is now come out as a transgender woman and goes for interviews.
Yeah.
And if the average Joe does not have access to hair removal therapies and medications that would assist them to assimilate into their subscribed gender, the preferred gender, then what does that look like in the work environment? That speaks to being discriminated against by your neighbors in the place that you live in, because now you are seen as this person that's crazy. You've lost it. You're not normal, quote unquote. Yeah. You don't fit within the normative understandings and imaginings and ideations around image and gender. And then, what does that look like in your job interview when you arrive? And
with your ID saying this, yeah,
and you are something else,
yeah.
But then, I love the fact that, corporate and governments, to some instances, they love diversity, and I'm seeing a beautiful shift in the way people are talking about these things. Almost every time I have conversations about inclusion for trans bodies, there's sort of like a counter argument to say, oh no, but that's your experience. That was in 19 Futek, that was like way back when the dinosaurs were filing their nails and doing their manicures still on Earth. Their souls rest in peace. But
speaking on this, sorry, let me interrupt you. I was having a very interesting conversation with some creatives around a project that we had decided we were going to take on. I think that was going to include capturing and filming and documenting trans lives and non-binary people. And
sounds exciting.
What we came across as an argument was they are people that are performing drag as a performance. That it's not their lived daily thing. Like if you are perhaps boys in heels, a dancer, your personality and your persona that is not you when you is this feminine presenting entertainment.
Yeah.
And you can switch in a moment of danger, because this was what came up. But in a moment of danger, if a man that does drag is in danger of being like, hey, you're a woman, and then he can switch into his male persona immediately. And then, within switching into his male persona, gain his safety and gain his privilege back of being male. What is that doing for trans women who are living as trans, as not as a performance, but not as entertainment, not as drag? Because now the public is somehow being confused or educated into, oh, so you're just doing that for your TikTok. It's not really who you are. You can switch back into male. What danger does that pose? Because in one area, we are loving that there's more fluidity and drag being popularized into entertainment, but there's some people who are living and not entertaining. Like, how can we merge those two existences? I hope there's a question somewhere in there.
Yeah. Yes, I like that. Yeah, that is such a critical one. Yeah. I do think that is something that, sort of feeds into a lot of stereotypes and misunderstanding around what it means to be a drag queen. So someone who gets paid to dress as a woman or perform as a caricature of a woman and not necessarily identify as a woman. So I'll give an example. There we've got, I think it's Evita. Evita is a theatrical performer, theatrical performer here in South Africa.
Yeah,
who does amazing satire on stage. Yeah, and does, even I'm trying to think of more individuals that do this work. But I think in their performance, in their drag performances, they sort of capture the nuances of what gender is in the complexities, and captures a more sort of comedic lens through which to see gender. And
Mark Lottering also did it in one of his skits, I think, also very well.
Powerful, very powerful. And I love Mark Lottering for being open-minded in their understanding of gender and sort of challenging these things in just them being, agreeative or being complacent in changing the system, in being a part of the conduits that are shifting that agenda and pushing the envelope as far as the performance of gender in their careers. But I think, when people don't really understand what the difference is between someone who's drag and now someone who's transgender, it starts to be being problematic and starts to step into the terrain of now being ignorant, because someone who's drag is someone that's just doing this for money, and someone who's transgender is living this experience in their everyday life. They go to bed in a nightdress. They perform their gender in a permanent state within their transgender status as a trans woman or an androgynous individual, and they're not necessarily fluid. And I think that when we limit people in their performance of gender, and we start to mistake this and say, hey, but Mark Lottering did it. Why are you still wearing a dress? You must wear the work uniform. You must dress as a man because you have a penis. And essentially that person is comfortable in wearing particular attire. It's not even about the clothes. It's about that person being comfortable enough to perform at their best and highest capacity. And I like the fact that corporate spaces, government, is having all these palatable conversations. Say, no, now we have these policies, we have inclusion, we are starting to see more gender neutral bathrooms. But on the ground, the reality is on the ground, we are not seeing that. I mean, on a daily basis, and I'm not like speaking just from my own experience here, on a daily basis as part of the LGBTQ spaces under my organization, Transgress Global, we attend live streams on all social media platforms. We are on Reddit, we are on Telegram, we are in WhatsApp groups that have group calls and have conversations about these things. We are on Twitter Spaces, we are on Clubhouse. we are on Facebook and Facebook groups, and all the conversations are the same. Everyone is complaining about the same issue, about discrimination. And it's not just the queer community, it's across the board. Inequality is a real matter. Even though we have these inclusive policies, we're not seeing real authentic implementation on the ground. We're not seeing changed attitudes. We're still seeing discrimination. We are still seeing exclusion. We are still seeing the dismissal of people's performance of gender, and therefore not giving them the appropriate pay, the appropriate job responsibilities and roles that they should be getting. People are being treated in undignified ways, even in corporate spaces, despite the more inclusive attitudes and polishing and purporting around policy, and diversity. But we want to see that in actual accountability. We want to see people being fired for being discriminatory. We want to see people getting demoted for failing to recognize their peers in the dignified ways that they should. And not allowing people to be discriminators and be actors against inclusion and diversity in our workspaces and lived environments. Yeah.
Yes, and this is what we were talking about earlier this afternoon, that you and I were having a conversation around how it's somehow acceptable, perhaps in the workplace, to discriminate or to somehow, make a queer person feel like they don't fit in. And because we know sexual harassment in the workplace is a real thing, that when a cis man and a cis woman, are involved in some kind of funny situation, and then the woman is like, no, actually, I was harassed. It's believable, right? That, hey, you were my boss, you wanted to have sex with me. That was a sexual discrimination in the workplace, and it's believable. But we don't believe it when a queer person is being harassed in the workplace because of her sexual orientation. We suddenly don't give it the same value as discrimination, right? And that's kind of also, that also needs to enter the workplace, that it's as serious when some underling or lower level staff member is being harassed sexually by a supervisor as when a queer person is being teased or humiliated or insulted, or just somehow you can feel it. But, I know why I'm being treated like this. And it does have, do you know what I'm talking about? Is that also something that we need to push for people to understand, that just because you're queer, you don't need to kind of squirm down and like retreat into your shell because your discrimination doesn't display the same value to something that's understood, Yeah. No, absolutely. That's like really, and that's where I'm asking, what can an ordinary citizen in the world, a member of the general population, an ally, queer or not queer, how can they, you don't have to be an activist in this world. We always think that it's up to policymakers, it's up to politicians to kind of make a change and be the leaders in like understanding this conversation that we have. What if you're just out here and it's not really your concern, but you want to make a positive difference? What can you say to people who, they feel like, no, it's just the job of these organizations, it's just the job of these people. If you're just the person out there living, what can you do to make a difference in like making this conversation something that actually makes a difference and people kind of know about, actually, let's all be equal over here. Let's we all know that gay person, we all know, but are we actually living responsibly as the rest of the population to kind of assimilate,
I'm back. So there was a little bit of interference for a second there.
No problem, but you got your camera still off.
Yeah, I turned it off temporarily while I'm trying to run around and get things switched on, but I'm going to turn it on just now.
No problem.
I missed a bit of the question previously.
No, my question is that we always expect the activist and the lawyer and the politician to be the one that's pioneering and leading the conversation around, yeah, equality for the queers, jobs for the queers, or let's understand the gender diverse minority. And we think like if our voice is not strong enough, that we can't really be greatly involved in the conversation. What if you're just an ordinary Joe, an ordinary citizen? How can we be helped by allies and just people who are just generally going like, I'll go with it. What do you need me to do? Because sometimes we feel like if we are just doing this work alone as the queer community and we're not getting enough, people from the rest of society to join in the conversation, then we're talking to ourselves, but then they're there and they're not part of our topics or our dialogues. What can they do kind of to assist, we've got like some distortion now with the sound of it.
Yeah, the political bodies to adopt sort of queer. Are we still there?
Yes.
So there is a tendency. Be good in a couple of. Yeah, it should be okay now, I think.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. So there is a tendency for government bodies to have a lack of authenticity as far as sort of pushing these agendas of inclusion and diversity. And there's more sort of an appropriation of being diverse and inclusive for the purpose of winning that vote and appearing to have support for the community. But, there is power in some of that, in that it's the window for marginalized groups to actually step in and vie for and push for authentic representation of what that support looks like and frame that in ways that are inclusive. And I like how, the activist sector, particularly in the queer spaces, are pushing for that and are making that happen for us in many different spaces. But unfortunately, there still is, even in corporate spaces, there still is a tendency to have a very tick box exercise approach to inclusion and diversity and having, more representation of our people fighting for the accountability that we want to see. And I'd say that the role of not just activists, but us as civil society is to be more involved, to speak up when we do have these community engagement platforms. That speaks to writing to your local councillor. That speaks to chiming in when we have these dialogues and these communication or community participation time windows to comment on bills, on new acts, on new laws that are being passed and policies that are being implemented. And in all of these, we don't necessarily have to do it as an individual. You can, if you have the resources, to send the email, to write something that's been well edited and sent as a recommendation to state departments that are responsible for overseeing that particular bill or that act that's being changed. Or you can affiliate with an organization that's closest to you or resonates with your issues on the ground. And a lot of these organizations, like Be True to Me, like Iranti, like GDX, like Act Chapter 2, and so many others that are in the space, the Triangle Project.
Like Tholwana, Molemo, we're trying to join the big guns of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
And in these conversations, it's not just about your name or your organization or the things that you want to push forward as an agenda. And here I'm speaking to someone that's listening. It's not just about you and your sort of positionality, but it's more about the issues on the ground. What's going on that the government is failing to see? Because for them, they're going to think and they're going to believe and they're going to get away with purporting that you are comfortable because they did an LGBTQ lunch, or they did a lesbian symposium workshop, and that was enough. And for them, it's enough. They tick that box, so they spent a particular budget on that. But you as a community, if you're still not happy and you don't say anything and you only complain on Twitter, nobody really gets to see and fully understand what the ramifications of, you know, that particular department blowing a particular budget on just a lunch or just a workshop, and not fully allowing the issues that affect us as a community or you as a community. And, you know, it allows that problem to continue to snowball and to grow because of the lack of inclusive ways of thinking and perceiving diversity and the implementation of that diversity in those spaces. And I think, you know, as activists, we are the ones that are conduits to facilitating that. We are the ones that organize these dialogues. We are the ones that then write these reports and submit them to these government departments and challenge the status quo to say, yes, we see that you allocated 300,000 as a budget for social inclusion projects for the LGBTQ. And I see you had a soccer tournament there and you gave away 100,000. I see there you did a dinner in Polokwane and you did this and this, you know, but in the things that you are doing, we are not seeing things that are tackling hate crimes. Where are the awareness programs? We are not, you know, like we need to see more vocal contributions, even if they are in the form of writing contributions from the community members to say, where are the gaps? And what do you want those gaps to be filled with? Like, what activities do you want to see? What do you recommend as far as bridging that gap? Because we continue to allow, you know, the very sort of tick box-ish approaches to continue to plague us. Yeah.
There'll be a lunch, there'll be an appearance of officials, and then the box will be ticked. No, that's very
and a celebrity party.
And you are very seriously involved, and you know, this is why we're so grateful to have you with us. But before we let you go, Sia, please tell us, what do you do for fun? Because now people have got this view of you so serious, writing, doing, advocating. I know you're so multi-talented. I know you're a performer, you're a singer, you're an architect, you're a creative, you're a speaker, you know, within this very important space of gender-based violence. So I'm basically asking you two questions. What do you do for fun? And any projects or activism that you're doing that you haven't mentioned, so that we get a glimpse of that also.
Okay. Wow, what a question. What do you do for fun?
Yes, what do you do for fun?
In most cases, what I find really inspiring for me and refreshing is to go back. So I go back to people. I go back to communities where I received support in my past, at my lowest, in different points of my life. And I like to reconnect with people that I've lost touch with, that are going through the most, whether they're unemployed or struggling in a particular way. And I like to reconnect with them and just have conversations, healing conversations about what they're going through, suggest ways in which they can, get out of the experiences that they're having, or just, listen as well. Just listening also works. Now I do this in different spaces. I mean, I'll give you one example. So when I arrived in Johannesburg, I came here because I had been attacked by an uncle of mine who had threatened to end my life, and had waved a weapon, a firing weapon at me, threatening to use it on me should I continue to live with my grandmother at the time. And at that moment, I was still unemployed, and I had recently ended a contract of employment, had moved back home and unemployed at that moment. So then I had to move out of home, but without employment and without secure income to be able to pay for rent. And so I found myself moving to Joburg without a full plan as to where to go, where to live, what employment opportunities to reach out to. But I was trying as a trans woman in a world where there still weren't gender marker changes being legalized like it is now, in a world where people still saw trans bodies as people that were affected mentally and unable to reason in logical ways. So there was a lot of unemployment in our community, even more back then. And I met a lot of interesting and amazing people. I mean, at some stage, I ended up homeless and I was living in someone's kitchen floor in Rivonia. And I wasn't the only one sleeping on that kitchen floor. There were like 5 of us. So I would go back and find out what happened to all those people. And some of them are living in Kempton Park with a job. There's one, there's another one that I reached out to recently. He's now a car guard in Sandton and he lives in a park, like he's homeless. You know, I go back to all of them and I see in what way can I collaborate with them? In what ways can we just have a healing conversation? And if there is capacity for me to be involved somehow to some kind of solution to help uplift them if they're stuck. And for me, that's what I run away into. I hide in different spaces with all these people that haven't improved each other's lives. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like revisiting your past, like in your homeless diaries. I see that as a TV show for some reason.
Wow,
I see that as a TV show. I know there's some open calls at the moment for even SABC shows. I know there's a lot of lack of responsibility when it comes to a lot of live shows. What is it called?
Reality TV.
Reality TV. I've noticed that the new conversation around reality TV is that they're really sensitive stories that are not being presented by presenters, perhaps of that TV show, that have the experience to kind of like, you've just told us your whole heart and your whole tragedy, and you are not even talking to a qualified psychologist. You are talking to a presenter who's there with their hairstyle and hairdo, you know.
Limiting.
So I think when people like yourself that have actually lived through the journey, and maybe you have like a documentary series of like, okay, this is what I've gone through, I'm looking to find, you know, there's like Kumbule Kaya and these kinds of things. Imagine if we look at your life and we kind of like, you know, because there's something that you're really trying to find out. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
I like that idea, and I think
I'm gonna give you that link, you know, because I didn't have an idea. I was like, there really needs to be some responsible storytelling that is real. Proper documentary series, you know, that isn't just sensationalizing and hyper. Are you familiar with the term poverty porn?
Yes.
Yeah. When I was in the arts a lot, there would be all these rich guys that take photographs or display images of like poverty, particularly in country. And then it's, oh, that's so beautiful. It's so sad. But your main reaction is the depiction of how well portrayed it is. But there's no responsibility of the artist to actually know the real story or to give back or to assist. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think some of us, you know, we kind of need to go back and not just like take photos and like, you know, but to actually, you know, think of like wellness programs, right? Anyway, that question was supposed to be, what do you do for fun?
I like that.
That question was supposed to be,
because for me, right, I've really, the appropriate word would be, you know, I still have scars, you know, scars from my past experiences that I'm still healing through. And part of that healing is reaching out to the people that tried to make it better for me in the experiences of my pain, to go back to them and you know, buy them clothes, buying their kids clothes if I can, you know, things like that. And I do all these things in secret. I don't post about them. I just disappear on a weekend, and I'll disappear the whole day. And I'll be talking to someone in a park, and people will just see this lady in makeup with fancy nails sitting with some hobo under the tree, not realizing that 6 years ago we were together in the same position, you know. And then we find that people are still stuck, you know, in that, and not able to find solutions. And a lot of the damage comes from just mental wellness and not being able to recognize that some of those issues are more mental. and also now exacerbated by their social position. Because, you know, there's a lot of mistrust that comes with being a person who's unemployed, that comes with being homeless, in that people don't really trust you with any opportunities. People don't want to hire you because they think you're going to steal something.
Yes.
Even worse now, you being a person of color, there's a lot of associations of you being a potential hijacker, a potential murderer, a potential thief, when in fact you've never had any ambitions in those directions. But just because you're in that position, people will never trust you. And it's even more difficult to then get a job, to then get out of homelessness, because people will see you as a threat.
Yes, of course.
So
and how it's displayed,
that I work with.
Sorry, Sia, but the way that on TV, there's a sensationalism to us wanting to laugh at a person, wanting us to see a person's mistake. There isn't like a healthy kind of like rehabilitation process, because we just want to, like, even if we're watching like a speed dating matchup of like, oh, let's find dates for these people, we want to highlight all the mistakes and the funny parts, and that's going to be the stuff that makes the audience come back and laugh. But like really responsible storytelling, real positive change when it comes to like really how the media can really assist. Yes, we need to tell the stories like really how it is, but if we are sensationalizing the mistakes and the, you know, the funny stuff, then, and we're not actually bringing in the real assistance, like bringing in a psychologist behind the scenes that's not going to be on camera, following up camera, you know, that's not in a different episode. That's the real stuff. And I definitely know that there, with October being Mental Wellness Month and things like that, I definitely know that there's quite a few people in the mental health space that are doing stuff up there in Joburg that I'm familiar with. So we can definitely talk about that. And you know, I'm dabbling and dabbling in making documentaries, and you've got your equipment. Who knows what we can do together, right? I want to just ask like some closing questions for us, please, because we've kind of, you know, we in our closing time here. I want to ask you, what is the most important material possession to have, and do you have it? Material possession.
Ooh. I mean, I have several. I have different categories.
Oh yeah.
I would say I have different categories. There's like in my daily life, like when I step out the house, when I'm going somewhere, I would say it's my power bank. My power bank is the best investment ever. I've got this power bank that allows me to charge my devices for up to 10 charges. So like I can charge. So I use many devices. I've got like 2 phones. I've got like 3 iPads and 2 laptops, and you know, it's just a mess in this place. But like when I'm out there in the world, I find that, you know, sometimes I'll be at an event and then I'll need to take 2 iPads with me, because I will be live streaming with the one device, and the other one I'll be videotaping and taking pictures. And then the other ones I am like audio recording. And then like the batteries will be dying along the way.
All the way.
So I feel like at least with the power bank, I can resuscitate my things and continue as per normal. So it's been my power bank has just been amazing. As far as healing is concerned, it's been my guitar.
Oh wow.
I love playing guitar as a healing mechanism. And I don't really do that here in the house much anymore because of some internal politics, which I'll discuss for another platform. And then of course, besides the guitar, I would say a personal favorite has been I've got this, like, it's a brush. Okay, maybe I can show it because it doesn't have a logo on it. But yeah, it's a brush that, okay, it's still got a bit of makeup.
Massage brush.
But yeah, but this is for washing and applying. I'm washing makeup and applying facial cream on your face and stuff. And this has been a dream for me. in terms of washing my face at the end of a long day when you get back from wherever you were, and you
Nice.
know, you feel like your face is oily and so on. You can just apply your face wash and it just does all the scrubbing for you. You just, you know, wave
Oh,
it over your face
beautiful.
and it does the removal. So for me, that's been for me a life changing experience to not spend that much time washing my face and trying to remove makeup and trying to scrub things off. It just, you know, rinse and
Nice.
go. Lovely stuff.
Oh, wow, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. I'm really enjoying this question. You never know what people are going to say, right? And then,
Yeah.
what are your views or do you have rules when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
online dating?
Ooh, that's a good one. To be honest, I love joking around. I love to joke around with people on social media, um, and say, "Oh, you're so sexy. Oh, you're so hot. Oh, you're so this. Oh, so that." But I have a tendency to do that to everyone. If the moment I get to know you, I'll be like, "Oh, when are we getting married? Oh, you know, you must come home sometime. Your junior is missing you. Our child is missing you." You know, I make jokes like that,
Yeah.
and people generally assume that I like them because of that. Meanwhile, I'm just joking around. But generally, if I really, really like a person on social media, I generally tell them. I don't care what platform it's on. I just send them a message, tell them, hey, listen, this is how I feel. Let's meet up and chat.
Yeah.
The disappointing part is that for me, I've seen that there is a tendency to, you know, because of how we've been visibilized as trans people, as queer people, there's an assumption that somehow you are moneyed, that you are resourced, and that you are going to
Oh,
become a blazer. And so even cis people now will pretend to to be available for you in intimate ways and so on. Meanwhile, they're not. They just, you know, essentially trading for the purpose of what they want to get, whether it's a job opportunity or resource. And yeah, for me, that's been a bit of a problem of late, like having to now deal with that politic of
mm,
not being sure of people's true intentions in wanting to be in some form of relationship with you. But yeah, I'm pro it. I think online dating is fun. I'm open to it. I don't like judging people. I like to give people an opportunity. Why not? I mean, even my nickname on social media is why not? That's what I call myself on TikTok.
hey, that's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And then what are your views? What is your wish? I mean, we're out here. I'll tell you what my wish is. My wish is that I wish everything we discuss and all of our experiences as the queer community were just like in a museum, like the party
Yeah.
museum, and it was all in the past. That's my wish.
Yeah.
That you just visited and people marvel, like, what really this happened? These are all the different
Yeah.
experiences. I just wish these
Yeah.
conversations were necessary, that it was archived and it was literally you paid to enter a building and you went there, you went like, how silly. But
Yes.
but
I
what is
like
your
that.
wish? What is your wish for the LGBTI community?
Whew. That's deep. That is so deep. To be honest, to be really honest,
Mm.
um, our community is going through a lot. And here it's not just the LGBTQ or the queer community. It's just in general, as a society, we go through so much. There's so much toxicity in the world, and the toxicity, it's become internalized when we are alone by ourselves. When you look in the mirror, when we wake up in the world. And I do think that it's broken us in our relationship with ourselves as individuals. But now I want to go back to the conversation and touch on the queer bodies and those that are sort of gender diverse, talking about the gender exchange. That what I wish for the community would be for us to love ourselves. And within that wish of loving ourselves, for us to become more unified. And when I talk about unified, I'm not just talking about socially us partying together and having fun or dating, but I want to see our communities forming economies, forming investment portfolios together, starting industries together, starting our own mini Netflix together as a community, like amassing resources and changing and shifting industries collectively. Because I think that's the one thing that the world has really managed to take away from the queer community, is that they've internalized the trauma and the exclusion, that we even exclude ourselves from loving ourselves as individuals, and then also now collectively. And I think that we deserve that. We deserve to heal. We deserve to unify and recognize ourselves as brethren and kin, but also to unify and form systems of creating job opportunities, creating the resources that we need as a community, creating opportunities for our communities, and even the future that we want collectively. Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh, fantastic. I'm all for that. So Zia, this is my last question. Describe yourself in one word.
Original.
Oh yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just wish we could all see ourselves as original, right? But because there's this strive for us to be normal and for us to fit in. What's that? Yeah, original. Oh, beautiful. You even got it somewhere there.
No,
yeah.
It's funny because I was going to say unique. I was going to say different.
Yeah.
But then, like, there's a packet from a takeaway that I bought, and it's like right there. And I thought, oh, actually, that's
me. I'm original,
line.
Right? But actually,
yeah,
that's where I think we are failing as humanity. We are so fearful of standing out, of being different, that we see it as a weakness. We see it as like, let me not be targeted for being different. But the more we actually see that we're all different, and that's something that we all are, we should not be striving to be all the same. That actually, that isn't something so rare, But otherwise, I thank you so very much, for joining us in the gender exchange. And I'm really, really hoping that we're going to influence a lot of thought and a lot of people, because we're streaming this, yes, but we're recording it, and maybe people can come back and kind of go like, I didn't know gender was such a wide topic. I didn't know you could say so much about gender. I just know that I'm a woman and there's men, and then that's it. And I'm really hoping that we are kind of like spreading the message that actually, how well do you know gender, So I really thank you for bringing in your experience and sharing with us, like your true experience, and with some of the parts that, that you've overcome, that you're still going through. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what you and I can do together. I don't know what else you would like to say as your parting comments, but I just really thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh my.
Bless you.
Yes. Hey, it's hectic. Parting words. First of all, I do think that we live in a world where almost everything we do is about other people and less about us and what it does for us, right? But I've found that this year, for me, for the first time in my life, I have started to understand that in our mortality, our actions become our immortality. The things that we do become the way in which we live forever. And so I've become more intentional about investing my energy and my time and my actions in the things that affect me and affect my people most. And I'm intentional about doing that. And I love that for the gender exchange vehicle. I love the fact that we, when I say we, and I'm talking about myself and yourself, and obviously the collective viewer who's watching this and listening in, that we are poised and we are positioned in a particular way that we can start to shift mindsets. We can contribute to the greater collective transformation that we need to ascend to the next chapter of our evolution as society. Mm-hmm. And for me, I respect this platform and I love it for that very potential, that it's creating spaces for critical conversation, and it's stimulating the kind of change that we need to see in the world. And I'm so happy to have been a part of that in some shape or form.
Oh, yeah. Really, really looking forward to engaging more with you and seeing and inviting you even for like more specific topics. I know we didn't delve that much into what you're doing with the GBV and things like that, but this particular topic was this, but we are so grateful. Thank you so very much. Until next time.
Great. Thank you again. I guess we'll chat offline.